Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, for decades, opinion makers argued to Congress that free trade worked even when it didn't, that trade deficits don't matter, and that industries displaced by cheaper imports should simply get to work to reallocate their resources so they could produce something else. Soon, America began producing much less of what it consumed, and soon became dependent on foreign countries, even for goods essential to our national security. So something had to give, and it did. U.S. manufacturers closed shop or offshored. Millions of American jobs were lost. The U.S. trade deficit soared to unprecedented and untenable levels. American farmers and ranchers exited their industry in droves, and America's economic growth slowed to a snail's pace. But there were a handful of winners that benefited greatly from the dismantling of America's production infrastructure. Multinational food conglomerates, Wall Street financial elites, and manufacturers on a global scale that offshored but continued to rely on the U.S. consumer market. These benefactors of America's weakened economy continue arguing that free trade works even when it doesn't, that trade deficits don't matter, and import ravaged industries should still focus on reallocated resources so they can do something different. But their time has passed, and that's because the rest of America has finally awakened. Former President Trump's administration was the catalyst that brought America to her senses. Never before had America called out China for cheating, called out countries for manipulating their currency, called out America's trade deficit as unsustainable, or said the fundamental truth about America's future. The fundamental truth is simple. America must produce more of what it consumes if it is to grow its economy for the benefit of all. So enter the Made in America campaign. It started when former President Trump issued his Buy American, Hire American executive order in 2017. The intent of the campaign was to focus America on rebuilding its dismantled production infrastructure, rebuilding American supply chains, bringing manufacturers back to U.S. soil, providing more good-paying jobs to Americans, and reversing America's dependency on foreign countries for critical goods like food, defense components, medical supplies, and medicines. But the initial campaign had a gaping hole. It did not provide the means for the largest segment of American agriculture, the one that contributes more than any other to the economic well-being of rural America, which of course is your U.S. live cattle industry, to even participate. That's because there was no way for either the government or consumers to support the U.S. live cattle supply chain because the product produced by that supply chain could not be distinguished as a made in America product from a made in Brazil or made in Namibia or made in Uruguay product. Without a law requiring beef sold in the United States to be labeled as to where the animal was born, raised, and harvested, the Made in America campaign is little more than window dressing for rural America. President Biden likewise appears to understand the fundamental truth that America must begin producing more of what it consumes. He likewise issued a Made in America executive order. This one focused particularly on rebuilding America's medical supply chain. But like the previous executive order, it too contains a gaping hole. Even where it might direct the government to source exclusively U.S. produced beef for our troops and for our children's school lunch programs, that can't happen until and unless both Congress and the President introduces and passes legislation to require all beef sold in the United States to be labeled as to where the animal was born, raised, and harvested. So therein is your mission, should you choose to accept it. You must convince your two senators, your U.S. representative, and the President to immediately introduce and pass a new mandatory country of origin labeling law so all beef sold in America is labeled as to where it was born, raised, and harvested. Now, doing anything less is really an insurance policy for the multinational conglomerates and importers, allowing them to continue substituting foreign beef for American-made beef produced by America's hardworking farmers and ranchers. And this will ensure that consumers continue losing on their end of the beef supply chain, cattle producers will continue losing on the other end, and rural America will continue losing its opportunity to recover from the decades-long period in which America did not understand that it has to start producing more of what it consumes. So good luck and thank you with your calls to Congress and the President, And please go to our website at r-cafusa.com to learn what you can do to help, particularly to join with us, so we can become strong enough to direct your U.S. cattle industry towards a more profitable and prosperous future for you and the next generations. With that, thank you and goodbye.